My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And thank you so very, very much for the wonderful comments of appreciation that I am receiving in private messages on YouTube and on Facebook for this series on 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. We're living in such absolutely fantastic, exciting times as more and more people are reading, they're watching, they're listening, and realizing there really are some answers to the biblical story of eschatology. And those answers are to be found in covenant eschatology. All right. I shared with you how the scoffers who deny the present passive indicatives in the chapter of 1 Corinthians 15, even though it's used 10 times, they tell us we don't have to pay attention to those. And yet those same individuals will turn right around and say it's imperative that we honor the Greek tenses when Paul speaks of Christ had already put all things under his feet. He was then currently reigning, and he would, future tense, put all things under his feet. So on the one hand, we're told that we must honor the Greek tenses. On the other hand, we're told, Greek tenses don't mean anything. Talk about inconsistent. Now watch this. I'll never forget a few years back, I was in an email correspondence with a minister, a post-millennial minister, in the Kansas City, perhaps Wichita area. And he was accusing me of being a false teacher. I was just distorting the biblical story of eschatology. So we began to focus on 1 Corinthians 15, and I took note of the present passive indicatives in 1 Corinthians 15. It was more than obvious in our correspondence. He had never seen that, had never heard that, and he called me a liar. I documented the use of those. He responded by telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I explained to him all of the different usages of the present tenses in the Greek. I just went through them. There is the historical present tense. In other words, something has already passed. Some call this a narrative present. And you're talking about events that took place in the past, but you're putting yourself back there, describing it in the present tense. Very common use of that. Well, the event is past, but you're describing it as if it is present tense. Well, he certainly wasn't going to agree that that was the use of the present passives. And so I went through all of the different usages of the present tenses. That ended our correspondence because I just kept asking him, can this be it? Well, he wouldn't answer. Can this usage be it? He wouldn't answer. Correspondence was over. In another correspondence, I made the point that what we have in 1 Corinthians 15 in regard to the resurrection, we have the already, but the not yet. We have the resurrection of Christ, who was the first to be raised from the dead. As we have explained, that cannot be physical death. So we have the beginning of the resurrection. We have the ongoing present reality in the present passive indicatives. And we have the future resurrection, the consummation of what had begun with Christ, what was ongoing when Paul wrote, and which would be perfected at the time of the harvest of Matthew 13. And this individual that I was corresponding with said, there is no such thing as the already, but the not yet of the resurrection. I was somewhat staggered by that claim. It just shows how desperate some people can get. In their desperation, they just throw something out there that they haven't even thought about. So I presented the following from the book of John. In John chapter 5, Jesus said the following, "Most assuredly I say to you, the one who hears me, my word, and believes in me, or believes in the one who has sent me, has everlasting life, and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death to life." Has passed from death to life. Now, that's an interesting situation, isn't it? We won't go into the Greek tenses there. We just make observation. But notice the very next verse, verse 25. "Most assuredly I say to you," now watch this and catch the power of it, "the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead," the who? The dead. And by the way, this is the necroi. "The dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live." Now wait a minute. Jesus is talking about a situation that was a first century reality. The hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of Man. Those who hear will live. Was that an already when Jesus spoke those words? Was it a past reality? Well, Jesus said, "Those who hear my voice, those who accept my word, and believe on the one who sent me, has everlasting life, and has passed from life to death." Now, I think he's speaking proleptically here, personally, about what was to become a reality when Jesus was resurrected and the gospel began to be taught. So it's a proleptic. Here's a prime example of past tense and even present tenses being used in anticipation of another event. This is remarkable in the use of the Greek tenses. But be that as it may, the hour is coming, and now is. I don't know of a commentator who denies the present reality of that, quote, resurrection, unquote. Everybody says, "Oh yeah, it's spiritual resurrection." They're spiritually dead. They're not physically dead. But then, of course, we turn around to verse 28 and 29. "Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in the grave shall come forth, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting condemnation." Oh, but that's got to be different. That's got to be physical resurrection, we are told. Well, number one, there is no indication in the text that Jesus changes the subject. All that we have here is "the hour is coming, and now is" versus the hour is coming. All we have is "those who hear will receive life, come forth to life," versus all. Some to life, some to condemnation. That's the only change. There is no change in the definition of the dead. Jesus doesn't redefine the death. But here's my point. Does anyone deny that verse 25 is talking about a present reality? Okay, so that would mean that those who are hearing the voice of the Son of Man are being raised, present, passive, indicative. If you want to apply this passage to today, which virtually everyone does. Okay? I don't have a problem with that. But the key issue is everyone admits that we have an already. An already that must, an already that absolutely must consider and incorporate present, passive, indicative. They are hearing, they're being raised. Hello? And then a future. The hour is coming when all shall hear. Well, in 1 Corinthians 15 then, Paul is saying the dead are being raised. But what is he doing? He's looking for, quote, the end, just as Jesus in John chapter 6, 39 and following we'll talk about the last day. Well, that is, quote, the end of 1 Corinthians 15, 21 and following. If not, why not? So in both John 5, 25 to 29, we have an already but not yet, which absolutely demands for the already that we would see the application of the present passive indicative. It's there. It's demanded. And then the future. In anticipation of the last day. In 1 Corinthians 15, we have the beginning of the resurrection with the resurrection of Christ, and the focus of that resurrection cannot be physical death, just like John 5:25 cannot be physical life and death. And we have the anticipation of the harvest at the end, which is the last day of John 5:39 or 6:39 and following. Folks, we have perfect harmony. And that harmony demands that we honor the present passive indicative. We would honor it in John 5. Why would we not honor it in 1 Corinthians 15? There is no hermeneutical, there is no exegetical, there is no linguistic, there is no grammatical, there is no syntactical reason for demanding that we would accept a present passive indicative in John 5:25. Well, I know the linguistic form is not technically there, but the concept is definitely there. So the idea is there, and it would be demanded that we accept it there, and then turn around where the present passive indicative is used 10 times, which is kind of a perfect number, isn't it? And we come to 1 Corinthians 15, where that perfect number of present passive indicatives is used, and we say once again, oh, well, it doesn't mean a thing. Folks, that is desperation exemplified. There is no justification for doing that.